Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So we are doing a webinar on menopause and weight loss. So this is a topic of interest to many women, and I guess maybe some men because they have partners who are going through this. And during menopause it can be a very challenging time for women because the body's going through a lot of changes. There's a lot of hormonal changes happening. And this actually, in reality does have an impact on body fat storage and muscle mass. And we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to share some information with you from references from PubMed. And Dr. Kirk's going to share his insights, and we're going to talk through them. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll have a better understanding of what's going on and what are some of the things that you can do to counteract the effects during this time and really help your body as much as possible.
You bet. Well, hey, folks, if you're watching this, give us the old thumbs up, the smiley face, let us know where you're from. I mean, it's always important because as we get this information out, we want to know who you are. So.
Yep, definitely. And so we also want to mention, too, that if you do have any medical issues, if you're suffering from any illness, please consult your doctor. We're not here to replace medical advice. We're just sharing information, so we just wanted to put that out up front.
You bet. Yeah, this is not a replacement for your doctor or your doctor's advice. If you feel that you have a medical condition, please consult your physician.
Thank you. Okay. So just to kick off, I guess that during menopause, there's a lot of changes that go on, which I just mentioned a few moments ago. Many ladies notice that they start to gain weight and their body shape can change. As well, I guess one of the main symptoms is getting those hot flushes, which can be very unpleasant. And also, obviously women stop having their periods or they become irregular at this time to eventually they stop altogether. And this has all got to do with hormone changes. And so according to the PubMed reference, it says that there's a reduction in the hormones including estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, and human growth hormone. So can you talk a little bit about that and share with our audience what goes on with those hormones during this time?
You bet. Well, what happens is that when a female body is going through a menopause, premenopause, what's happening is you're shifting from having the ovaries producing the hormones to the adrenal glands producing the hormones. And the adrenal gland, they're already got a job, right? They're already working on what they already are working on. So as you're seeing that shift, what happens is that the body's actually changing. So you're going to see some things like Katie was just saying. The estrogens are going to go down, progesterones are going to change, the growth hormone, the insulin factor is going to change. But part of it is that you got to remember that the female body is switching from a body where it's kind of, and a lot of people don't think about this, but it's kind of switching the immune system at the same time, right? Because a lot of people, I'm gonna say this, Katie, maybe you're probably full aware of it, but your immune system has to be set up where it doesn't attack the baby. If you're pregnant, you've got something inside of you that's got different DNA than you. Well, if I've got something inside of me that's got different DNA than me, guess what my immune system does?
I was thinking about you having a baby inside of you.
Well, no. What if I had different DNA? Like I'm talking a bacteria, a virus, a fungus, right? If your body
will attack it.
The immune system is attacking it, right? Trying to kill it, right? So the difference between men and women, right?
Yeah.
Is that premenopausal, your immune system has to be able to not only recognize when it's a bacteria or virus and attack it, but when it's a baby, not attack it.
Right.
Well, did you ever think about it like that way?
Well, I guess it's a foreign object. Your body's growing something else inside of it. Obviously, it's your baby if it's a woman having a baby. So yeah, that makes sense, definitely.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't think of it that way. So that's why we tend to see that women tend to have more autoimmune diseases.
Right, okay.
Right? because your immune system is different than my immune system, right? But after menopause, guess what? Your immune system is shifting more to a different immune system. It doesn't need to recognize it anymore because you're not going to be carrying a baby anymore.
Right. Okay. So so that's when we start having these reduction in hormones. So yeah. I guess you know, women notice at this period that they start to gain weight and that they probably have a reduction in muscle because of the changes in hormones. So can you talk a little bit to that and what's going on there?
Yeah. So what ends up happening is that when you're having all these changes, of course, you know, again, the ovaries are shutting off. They're not producing the hormones as much anymore, and it's kind of making that gradual change. Sometimes a really fast change. And what happens is that the adrenal glands are taking over, and the adrenal glands, they get kind of messed up. So what happens, it messes up the cortisol. And what the cortisol does, the cortisol works with the pancreas, and it tells the pancreas, you know, produce more insulin, right? And in your body, you start to have the dysglycemia, where the insulin isn't responding. Your cells aren't responding, so they're not uptaking the sugar, right? And when your cells aren't taking in the sugar, guess what happens? It has to be stored somewhere, right? And so that's why, like, when I watched a video, I want to say it was a couple months ago, I watched a video, and she was saying on that video, she said that's part of the problem, is that in modern days today, we eat way too many carbohydrates.
Right.
And what do the carbohydrates do? They turn into sugar. They turn into simple sugar. And so now here you got that messing with it at the exact same time. And so women tend to crave more carbs than men do. I mean, if you ask me what my ideal diet would be, what would I want for a meal, I'm going to list meat, potatoes, things like that, right? But if I ask you, you're going to say pastas and right? I mean, that's, yeah. And that's what women tend to crave, because it bumps up the serotonin levels, it bumps up the estrogen levels and things like that. So what happens is when you go into this menopause, right, when you go premenopausal, the hormones are getting all changed, messed up. So the sugar levels get messed up, the cortisone levels get messed up. And when your cortisone levels get messed up, and the human growth hormone gets messed up, all of these different hormones have an effect. And women tend to eat less protein than men. And so what happens is all of a sudden now you have this shift. You're getting more visceral fat, right? And visceral fat isn't belly fat. Visceral fat is fat that grows around your heart. It grows around your liver. It grows around your kidneys. You start having fat that is put in those places, right? But the other thing is, because the hormones are getting messed up, you start seeing a decrease in bone mass as well. And you start seeing a decrease in muscle mass. You see a decrease in strength and overall strength of the muscle at the same time. So we're really seeing big shifts in that most people probably don't even think about.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting point about hormones. I was seeing a doctor because I actually, for those watching, suffer from endometriosis. The doctor that I was seeing is actually a specialist in hormones and has a really good understanding of them. And he said that he believes that every woman should be taking some sort of bioidentical or natural progesterone cream to balance everything off. And I also read from the studies that it is noted that progesterone can alleviate those hot flushes for women. So I just wanted to share that. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really believe that. We had a compounding pharmacy right here in Fargo, North Dakota, where I'm at. And, you know, Fargo is so pro-medical for those people that live here, that have been here. I mean, it's so pro-medical that the compounding pharmacy couldn't even survive here. And so they shut it down. Yeah, so the closest one is 3 hours away.
Yeah, wow. So, I mean, we only have a couple, because I'm here in Melbourne. We have, I know of two, and they're certainly in the city. And if you do, you know, for anyone who's watching this, if you do get a prescription for a bioidentical hormone, be it progesterone, it's actually quite difficult to find a doctor that will do that, or that, more to the point, understands it. So, I mean, you can find doctors that do. I recommend, you know, looking for an integrated doctor, and integrated doctors are ones that have an understanding of Western medicine combined with naturopathy, so they've done both degrees. And then you have others that obviously specialize in hormones as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's just something that I've learned about, and people might find that information useful. So in terms of like when people have those imbalances, I won't say imbalances, let me rephrase that, say reduction in those hormones during the menopause period, what sort of natural ingredients could someone take to assist the body or help the body during that time?
Well, like you said, I mean, definitely the hormone, the natural hormone, bioidentical hormone replacement, you know, I mean, and you got to go by your doctor again, and that progesterone creams from a wild yam. There's certain things that you can use. Like I've looked at products that use extracts from something called kudzu. Right? Mm-hmm. And what kudzu is, it's a plant that fits in the category of clover, and they found that it's got some natural ingredients that will help to balance those hormones. And there's a lot of different, you know, black cohosh and different herbs, herbal medicines that will work really nicely for balancing that out. And then, of course, you know, I always stress diet. But exercise too. I mean, right now, it's not always taking something. Sometimes it's doing something. Right.
Yeah. So we'll touch on exercise shortly. So with another thing that happens during this time, according to that article, is that women are more susceptible to oxidative stress, and this actually increases during this time. Can you talk a little bit about that and perhaps how we could like support the body and combat that as much as possible?
Right. Well, you know, and of course, oxidative stress is that a lot of folks, they hear that word, but they don't really understand it. When something oxidizes, what it actually means is that it's like if I went outside right now and I threw a rake out there, and then in the spring I went and picked it up, and that rake was laying out in the snow all winter. What happens is it starts to rust. That's oxidation. Right? Mm-hmm. So in your body, what's happening, what's actually causing that is that free radicals are stealing oxygen molecules from your other cells. So that's what oxidation is. So it's caused by free radicals, which is caused by toxins. And so during this time, again, because you're having that shift in hormones, what's happening is that it's giving your body kind of a weakness, right? As things are changing, your body's a little weaker, so it allows this oxidation to take place a little faster. And so what can you take for that? Hydrogen water would be really, really important, because hydrogen water, what's that going to do? It's going to turn the free radicals into water, right? Because when you combine H with O, you get H2O. That's water. And so in my opinion, that is probably the best free radical scavenger that there is. Other things that you can take, you can use, you know, just vitamin C. You can use certain plant extracts, fucoidan, resveratrol. You can use even fish oils are free radicals scavengers, and they'll grab them up and neutralize them, and that's all you're really doing. And so in your body, you gotta reduce these free radicals quite a lot, because as you take and you reduce one, glutathione or vitamin C or any of those, what happens is it produces another free radical, and it produces another free radical. And that's why I like using hydrogen, because hydrogen, it doesn't reduce down to another free radical. It just neutralizes it, turns it into water. So that's probably, you know, as far as like the free radicals, the oxidation, that's the best way of doing it.
Well, and it's a really safe, I guess, ingredient to use as well.
Yeah, very safe, because, you know, I haven't seen anything where it's dangerous for anybody, unless you're a blimp.
Some people might think, oh, hydrogen, aren't you talking about the hydrogen bomb? I mean, what do you say to people who think that?
Right. You know, and that is true. When I first heard about it, that you actually could consume hydrogen, I'm like, what? You know, and in high concentration, sure, it's explosive, but when it's stabilized, when it's H2, you know, it's a stable molecule, and you're not talking, you know, like blimp type of hydrogen blimp type of concentrations of it, so you don't have to worry about it. You know, light a match and explode.
It's like 15 parts per million or something like that.
15 parts per million. Yeah, that's the most powerful one that I've seen. Most of them are down around like less than 1 part per million.
Wow. Okay.
1 part per billion, actually.
Okay, so that's a great tip. So another thing that this article talks about said that there is a further reduction, and I know that actually, before I say this, is that a lot of people, or many people can suffer from vitamin D deficiency because they're not out in the sun much, and I would obviously be one of them. I'm hardly ever in the sun. But in this article, it actually said that during menopause, women's requirement for vitamin D goes up because they are more likely to suffer from D deficiency, and that actually has an interaction with fat gain and muscle loss. So
yeah. I mean, because the vitamin D, it's used to make the natural hormones, right? You have DHEA, which is converted to the estrogens and the testosterones and the progesterones, and it's the good cholesterol and all of that. So what ends up happening is that when you're not getting that, when you have that greater requirement and you're not getting it, what ends up happening is that you start to see those systems fail just a little bit.
Right. And so then that brings me onto a mineral, and everyone would have heard about this, and that is calcium. And actually, when I first heard about it was probably from the TV. You know, they're talking about take calcium supplements, yada, yada, yada. And I'm thinking, yeah, like, why would you need it? But actually, when I read the article, it said that due to the actual changes in hormones, calcium levels can drop further. So that actually is an important one to supplement. So can you speak a little bit about calcium?
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember when when I was married and my ex-wife, she was having some issues, and I got her started taking a calcium supplement, and all the hormone issues just, I mean, really within days, it worked that quickly, right? And we can't make any medical claims, things like that. So if you're listening to the video, I mean, make sure and see your doctor. You know, this isn't a replacement for that, but she started taking it, and things improved, and so, you know, you have different needs, and along with the calcium, of course, like we talked about, vitamin D. Everybody knows vitamin D and calcium, they kind of go hand in hand, right? And then you have all the other constituents of healthy bones and muscle, and so you need to replace that as well.
Great. So that's a good tip. So then that brings me on to the next point, which is protein requirements. So this is a really big one. So the article talks about you need a certain amount of protein during this time. Animal protein, they actually talk about in the article, and or amino acids, the right combination of amino acids. And there's a certain amount of protein that is actually required. This is actually a massive part of the article. Do you want to speak a little bit about protein?
Yeah. So when you take a look at science, you take a look at the population. I mean, we're an aging population, so we're not just talking about menopause. I mean, let's be honest. This article, the information that we're giving you, you can apply this to men as well, right? Because as we age, we have different requirements. And the population, I was just jotting some notes down. In 2005, 1/10 of the population was over the age of 60, and they're saying by the year 2050, or 1 out of 10 people were over the age of 60. In 2050, they're saying it's going to be 1 out of 5 people will be over the age of 60, right? And and so what happens is that you lose a 0.5 to 1 kilogram of muscle mass per decade of your life, and then when you hit those later years, what ends up happening is that you tend to lose that muscle mass even quicker. And because of the changes in the hormones, like what Katie and I are talking about right now, women tend to hit that where it peaks, where it goes really fast, where the reduction in muscle mass starts to go up at about the age of 65. That's kind of when that peak is. But in men, it's later. It's about 85 years of age. right? So you can see that it's going to affect women, and that's why you tend to see, you know, little old ladies, they got the hunched over back and bone fractures earlier in life than you do men. I mean, and then when you look at the average lifespan of a man, what is it, 78 years old now for a man? And I think women, yeah, and women is 80. Isn't it off by just a little bit? I mean, probably it's because women don't do the stupid things that men do, but that's another story. But as we're looking at this, so the question was, as far as like, you know, how much protein do you need? And if you look at the what I'm going to say, the RDA, or the recommended daily allowance, they're saying that we need about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, right? And a kilogram being 2.4 pounds for those of us in America, right? But the article says 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. But when you take a look at Dr. Wolf, who put together a really good branch chain amino acid product, what he says is that we actually need 1.2 grams of these essential branch chain amino acids in a specific blend. And he found that actually is more adequate to provide growth of muscle. And what happens is, like, I look at my folks as they're aging. I'm sure you look at your mother at the same time. And as they're aging, they tend not to eat as much, right?
That's true. The appetite goes down. Yeah,
they pick a little bit and they just don't eat. They don't have that craving. They don't have that taste for food. And so they tend not to eat meat. They tend not to eat protein. And so sometimes supplementing is a great way of doing it. Sometimes it's the only way, right? And as I look at anti-aging and age reversal in general, it's one of the things that I tell people. It's on the top of the list, is talking about protein, about building muscle, keeping your muscle mass strong, because they found that, and I know this is kind of getting off topic just a little bit, but they found that if you start losing muscle mass, you start getting dementia.
You also get fatter too.
And you get fatter, because what happens is that, just like if we look at a beef cow, right, you get marbling between the muscle, and so that's what we tend to see when females going through menopause. They tend to have more of that, let's call it marbling, right? And what is that? Well, grab a steak, take a look at it. Look at the steak. There's little lines of fat that kind of weave through the steak. And that's what's happening as you go through menopause. So you're getting more of that fat between the muscle fibers.
So, and there's also a relationship between muscle mass and body fat. So my understanding is that as you reduce your muscle mass, and this is why it's really important to keep it, or one of the reasons, is that it reduces metabolism. Your body does not require as much energy or food to maintain 50, say if a woman weighed, say, 60 kilos. If she had, if there was two women and one had a much higher muscle mass than the other lady who was the same weight but had more body fat, then the lady who had more body fat would have to eat less, because their body doesn't have as much energy requirement, because to maintain muscle on the body requires more energy and more food than it does, you know, having less, if that kind of makes sense. I didn't really explain it that well, but one really good example, I guess, of this, and this is obviously not a story relating to a woman, but so an ex-partner of mine was a bodybuilder, into the gym quite a bit. And this is what, going back when I was pretty young, when I was about 26. And at this time I was kind of experimenting with different health diets and things like that, and decided to go vegetarian, and convinced him to become vegetarian as well. Previously he'd always eaten kind of steaks and chicken and stuff like that. Because he actually had a lot of muscle, quite a lot, when he went to the vegetarian diet, the protein in the diet reduced, and he started losing muscle. Within about 2 months, he lost about 12 kilos of muscle, Kurt. And the only thing I could figure out was, wow, we cut out all his animal protein, all of it, and replaced it with beans and lentils, and he dropped 12 kilos of muscle in about 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, so that to me was like a practical example of how it actually translates into the real world, that being the importance of having sufficient protein, and everybody's protein requirements different. Like what you said, it's dependent on body weight. He weighed a lot more, so he had a much higher requirement for the protein, but that the protein is really important to maintain because it's required for the metabolism, and it's also required for mobility and stability in terms of walking. They actually measure frailty. A measure of frailty is muscle mass. So as we get older, this is really important to maintain because as we mentioned, that women going through menopause are more susceptible to losing that muscle and gaining more body fat. So we really want to make sure that we can maintain and even increase the muscle if we can. And we're not talking about looking like a bodybuilder. We're talking about functional muscle that's required for health. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other thing too is that, you know, we were talking earlier about the hormones that get messed up, right? So you have more insulin resistance, and as you have more insulin resistance, what ends up happening is that you're not building muscle because of the insulin resistance, and so therefore the protein requirements tend to go down too.
Yeah, yeah. So the way I've worked out how much, so I've done the math on how much protein I need to maintain, and I always try to make sure to never drop below that, which is 62 grams, I think I worked out. So 1.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, so I weigh about 54, 55 kilos. So I always make sure to have that. But at the start, it could be quite tricky for some of you who are watching, and you go, well, how do I know how much protein, you know, the food's got that I'm eating? Well, firstly, most any food that's been packaged has got it on the label generally, but you can buy a protein counter, like a pocket guide, or you could even probably download an app. It'll give you some indications of, you know, how much protein's in, you know, a breast of chicken, how much protein's in some steak, how much protein's in a bowl of beans, how much protein's in milk. And so it's a really good idea. My suggestion is for people to become mindful of being able to understand how much protein they're taking in, and not just having a go, oh, it's probably enough, if they've got no idea about protein requirements, because they may find that they're actually not getting them. And like what you said, as people get older, like your parents, my mother, they tend to eat less. And I bet that if I actually did the math on how much protein mum's eating, it's probably gone down significantly compared to what she would have used to eat when she was younger, because she's eating less. And so now it's an important time to actually be mindful about are you hitting that minimum protein requirement?
Yeah. And I think it's important to point out, really, when we're talking about building muscle mass, right, like Dr. Wolf found out in his research, is that it's not just grabbing protein, it's having the right blend of the right amino acids, right? The right blend of the right branch chain amino acids, which are essential amino acids. And what that means is, when I say essential, your body can't make them. You have to take them in. They have to be in your diet. That's what essential means, is you have to have them in the diet.
And so some sort of supplement that had the essential amino acids would obviously be beneficial at this time for a woman, or at any time really, but particularly so during this period. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to combat the problem that we're talking about with the menopause, I mean, it would just make sense that here's something that you need to take, otherwise you're going to have issues.
Yeah. Yeah, so then that brings us on to the last aspect of the talk, which is maintaining muscle, which of course comes through exercise, but in particular resistance exercise, so that you're actually making the muscle work. And there's different ways that you can, different types of exercises that you can do to do that. Do you want to talk a little bit about resistance exercise and maintaining, at least maintaining, if not building even a little bit of muscle?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that a lot of people, because for the last few years, we've really stressed that as you get older, you want to do cardiovascular exercise. You want to be aerobic type of exercises, right? Which are just, you know, bike riding and things like that. And so what they found now, again, talking about muscle mass, building and maintaining muscle. And when we talk about, you know, when I've done my talks on preventing dementia, what you have to do is you have to do the resistance, which means do an exercise with weights. So it might be just taking yourself like I am right now, and I'm balancing myself in the chair, and I'm lifting myself up and down out of the chair using my arms. That's resistance type exercises, right? You don't have to go to the gym. You know, a lot of people, like where my mom lives out in rural North Dakota out here in the States, the closest gym is probably 30 miles away. Well, you tell an 80-year-old you got to drive to the gym and work out 3 times a week. You know what she's going to do?
No way.
Not going to do it. Not going to do it. Right. So this is what I actually did with my mom, Katie. You'll like this. What I did is I bought her a set of DVDs.
Yeah.
And I said, now you play these, and what you do is you follow along with the instructor, and that's what he's doing. He's just having her use things that she already has in her house. You know, it might be a can of soup.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't have to be a weight, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When I was working with my patient over in Wisconsin, 96 years old, I had him go out and buy a set of 2-pound hand weights. Right? And he just lifting 2 pounds. It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have, you're not trying to be King Kong. You're not trying to be Sylvester Stallone, Rocky.
No.
Right?
Just be functional and maintain a level of muscle, because, you know, the saying goes, you know, use it or lose it. And
That's
this
right.
particularly applies to the time of menopause, even more so. And from what I've read is that actually what's required during menopause is extra effort above and beyond what you've done before. Well above and beyond. And it's particularly during this time that really need to put that effort in, because this is the period when females, unfortunately, are more susceptible to the weight gain and loss of muscle. And then they can develop the condition that you've done talks on, where you've got high body fat and low muscle, and it's called, what's it called?
Where you have low muscle and higher fat? Well, it's sarcopenia.
Yeah. There you go. Yep. So that's mentioned a lot in the article, and that during menopause, women are much more susceptible to that, because as you lose muscle and you gain more fat, now you're swapping the ratio on your body.
Yeah. Well, I remember reading part of the article, and I was just kind of junting through here and looking for it. But they actually said that they did a study where they took a group of women, and they actually, it might have been a whole group of people, not just women, and they had them do aerobic type exercises, and then they checked their muscle mass. And then they had another group of people do resistance exercises, and they checked their muscle mass. And what they found was that the group of people that were doing the aerobic type exercises had 0 gain of muscle mass. 0. Because you'd think you'd gain some, just a little bit. Yeah,
none. Actually, it's a really good story, because another example of that is that, you know, having done some weightlifting and some competitions, I read so many stories about women that would prepare by doing lots and lots of cardio. They get on the running machine or the bike and that. And yes, definitely there are many health aspects to that. But in terms of building muscle, as you said, it's not effective at all. And that it wasn't until they switched the ratio and started doing some weight resistance or body resistant exercise and less cardio, and make it more about the body resistance and weights, now their actual body shape starts to change the way they want, because they're actually putting on muscle.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Katie, I mean, here on our Facebook page, the fitness group page here that we're talking on, you know, I started really paying attention a month ago to the label. I started turning the product, whatever I was eating. I went on an app on my phone. It's called Fitness Pal, right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use Fitness Pal, and with Fitness Pal, it tells you how many grams of protein, how many grams of fat, how many grams of carbohydrates that are in each of your food. And so I started really paying attention to it, and I started trying to get that balance. And I'm going more keto. I know you're not really up on the, you know, promoting the keto, but I wanted to try it, right? Because I've tried just the calorie counting. And the problem with the calorie counting for me is that up and down for the last 20 years of my life, up and down and up and down. And what I personally like about the keto type diet is that I'm getting those fats that we're talking about that you need, that your body needs. It's got it's got 9 calories per gram versus only 4 calories per gram. And so you find yourself just craving less food. And you need those good fats, like we were talking about earlier, for your body, for your hormones, your DHEA, your estrogen, your progesterone, and your testosterone. And I found that I feel better. My leg that, got all busted up in the motorcycle accident, I don't have any pain in it at all right now. So balancing that out with the different things, the different products that we're talking about, using the essential amino acids, using vitamin D, using antioxidants, using hydrogen, things like that, I've seen a really good change.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, so just in closing, I guess the most important takeaway would be doing that resistance exercise or some, basic weights. And if you've got any health challenges or any injuries preventing you, please consult your doctor or a specialist. Physios are great and can create programs for people who have conditions and need that extra support and guidance. And then the other thing is to, become conscious about the amount of protein you're eating in your diet. So those are probably the 2 biggest takeaways I got personally from that article. So is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, Kurt. And thank you, everyone who's watching live. And if you're watching the replay, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this has provided some value for you and at least got you thinking or perhaps inspired or motivated you to do some things to really help yourself and make your life better. And I know that for women during menopause, it can be a bit of a scary time. And yeah, so hopefully this information is useful. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Thanks for bringing this together. Bye-bye.
Bye.